Is she back here or is she up here? It's hard for me to tell. Welcome back. This is Buddhist Books Podcast, episode 173, Tipiṭaka, part 104, in which I will recite Bhikkhunivibhaṅga, Nissaggiya 8 and 9. For those who have never seen me before and have no idea what this is, feel free to click here. That will take you to Tipiṭaka Part 1 rather than 104, and then things will make more sense. However, if you'd rather watch this one, and it is the first one you've watched, then I will translate some of that Pali into English. Tipiṭaka means 3 baskets, referring to, in old times and probably somewhere today, well, more than one place, they would keep these texts in 3 baskets, 3 rectangular baskets. And one was for the rules and discipline, one was for the teachings, and one was for higher doctrine. And so what we're reading is the Vinaya Piṭaka, which is the first basket, which is the rules and discipline. The Bhikkhunivibhaṅga means nun analysis. It's the rules for nuns in Lord Buddha's original order. And Nissaggiya means forfeiture, meaning you break a rule where you end up with something that you shouldn't have, so you have to forfeit it to the order. Our special guest today, the Pillar of Ashoka, a sort of modern, it's been adopted by the Republic of India as kind of a patriotic symbol, so that's what this is specifically. But it's basically the same as the old Pillars of Ashoka. We'll show you just one in previous episodes. That's an old stone one that I saw in some cave dwellings outside Pune. So that was from a long time ago. They were, I think, 1st century BC, monks living in those caves. But anyway, so Ashoka, you might know from here, that's King Ashoka. So what we're covering today is pre-sectarian early Buddhism. And after about 300 or 400 years after Lord Buddha, King Ashoka came along and became an avid sponsor of Buddhism in a similar way that you could say that Constantine became for Christianity, and it had a similar effect on India as, you know, Constantine's conversion had on the Roman Empire, if that makes sense. So for a long time, well, for a while, at one point, starting with King Ashoka, India was a very Buddhist country, but then it became less so and more Hindu, and then eventually more Islamic for a while. And then now in India you can find various strains of Buddhism that came from outside India, but the native Buddhism of India kind of was wiped out for a few hundred years, but then has come back. So it originated in India, left India, disappeared from India, then came back to India. So I'm in India, if you didn't know. Goa, which has a whole other thing going on that's unrelated to Buddhism. But anyway, so yeah, I've talked a lot about the Pillar of Ashoka in the past, so I think that's enough for today. We'll bring the dial on back to pre-sectarian early Buddhism, and I will go ahead and get to the reading. Forfeiture, Nissaggiya 8. Once upon a time in Bihar. No. At one time, the Enlightened One, the Lord, was staying at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Now, at that time, nuns dwelling in cells belonging to a certain guild were going short of kanji. Then that guild, having made a voluntary collection for kanji for the nuns, having laid aside what was necessary in a certain shopkeeper's house, well, at least it's not a cloak seller this time, having approached the nuns, spoke thus, quote, "Ladies, in such and such a shopkeeper's house, what is necessary for kanji is laid aside. Having had husked rice brought from there, having the kanji boiled, make use of it." End quote. The nuns, having got medicine in exchange for what was necessary, made use of it. Sidebar. Last time I had said that perhaps when I listen to this, myself reciting this later, it'll make more sense, and it did. I never was able to figure out what was going on in Nissaggiya 6. I mean, during the video, but then afterward I was like, oh, okay. It's just a sort of turn of phrase that I missed, where the robe material had been laid aside, and the robe material was what was necessary, and they traded what was necessary for medicine. Now, you might be thinking, well, medicine, that's pretty important, right? But earlier, it's somewhere in these books, basically, medicine is defined as like honey, molasses, and ghee, and a couple of other, things that we today perhaps wouldn't think of as medicine, at least in the conventional sense, maybe in an Ayurvedic sense in certain contexts, but certainly not, modern medicine. Anyway, so that was what was happening then, and it's happening again now, except with kanji instead of rope material. All right, then that guild, having found out, spread it about, saying, quote, "How can these nuns get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to a company," end quote. That's exactly how they sounded back then, too, in English and everything. No, it was a different language. Quote, "Is it true?" So, again, Miss Horner has skipped. I assume it's Miss Horner that's doing this, unless maybe the ancient scribes left out all the stuff that usually goes in between here and just jumps to Buddha talking without even saying that it's Buddha talking. Quote, "Is it true, as is said, monks, that nuns got something in exchange, belonging to a company, end quote, quote, "It is true, Lord," end quote. Because the 3 dots are missing. There's no 3 dots. Usually there's 3 dots indicating that there's like a page and a half where the nuns talk about it and they get outraged, and then they tell the monks, and the monks talk about it and the monks get outraged, and then one of them goes to Lord Buddha and says, what's going on with the nuns? And Lord Buddha says, what's going on with the nuns? And he says, they're doing this. And then Lord Buddha asks, that's what goes on in the 3 dots usually, but there's not even 3 dots. So I'm confused. Maybe one day I'll get an actual Pali Tipiṭaka and learn to read it. We'll see. We'll see how long I live. The enlightened one, the Lord, rebuked them, saying, quote, "How, monks, can nuns get something in exchange, 3 dots, belonging to a company? It is not, monks, for pleasing those who are not, parentheses, yet, and parentheses, pleased, 3 dots, this rule of training. Whatever nun should get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to a company, there is an offense of expiation involving forfeiture," end quote. So it's the same as the thing with the robe material, because that wasn't even specifically about robe material. It was getting something that was necessary, destined for the order, and trading it for something else. The first one was that was donated. The second one was that the nun asked for, or that the order asked for. And this third one is belonging to a company. It's the same rule, but 3 different. Whatever means 3 dots. None means 3 dots. For what was necessary, parentheses and parentheses appointed, for another thing, destined for another thing means. For what was given for another thing. It's fun when the definition is shorter than the thing it's defining. Belonging to a company means it is for a group, not for an order, not for one nun. Okay. Should get something in exchange means 3 dots. CVI 2:1-3, instead of belonging to an order, read belonging to a company. Okay, so it defines belonging to a company as, it is for a group, not for an order, not for one nun. Interesting. I missed that in the story. I'm not sure what the group was that isn't an order of nuns. Maybe it's just not for the whole order of nuns, but for one group of nuns. So it's a company. Okay. Yes. Should get something in exchange means 3. Oh, we already read that. If she is the first wrongdoer. Right. All that. So this rule doesn't apply if she's mad, if there are accidents, etc. It varies. It's not entirely the same every time. So it's a little obnoxious to put it in 3 dots because we can guess, but we won't know exactly what goes in those 3 dots. We can kind of know approximately what goes in the 3 dots. Okay, well, there it is. I don't really have anything to say about that rule, so I'll just keep reading, shall I? Forfeiture, Nissaggiya 9. 3 dots, okay. At one time, the enlightened one, the Lord, was staying at Sabati in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Now at that time, nuns dwelling in cells belonging to a certain guild, 3 dots, parentheses, CVIII, 1, and parentheses. Obviously, VIII is 8, referring to Nissaggiya 8. I'm just reading out the Roman numerals that way to emphasize the obnoxiousness. 3 dots, quote, 3 dots, make use of it, end quote. And the nuns, although having themselves asked for what was necessary, yet having got medicine in exchange, made use of it. Then that guild, having found out CVIII 1, after belonging to a company, insert parentheses and end parentheses, that they themselves asked for. So that was Nissaggiya 7, though. So what is the difference between this and Nissaggiya 7? I'm sorry. They themselves asked for. That was Nissaggiya 7. They got something in exchange for something that was necessary. Get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to an order, and that she herself asked for. Well, yeah, there's more stuff in that, but still, I don't see the difference. Maybe that's why Ms. Horner decided to shorten this to half a page. So I'll just read it. And sorry about today's episode being such a dud. Maybe I'll read Nissaggiya 10 just so it's not kind of like that, but slightly different, but actually the same in an indistinguishable way. All right, where were we? 3 dots, quote, 3 dots, this rule of training. Whatever nun should get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and then parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to a company, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for. Okay, so it's a company and she herself asked for. Where the other one, it was belonging to an order and she herself asked for. Okay. There is an offense of expiation involving forfeiture, end quote. Whatever means three dots, none means three dots, for what was necessary, parentheses, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, three dots, belonging to a company, three dots, that she herself asked for, means oneself having asked for. All right. The Port Authority Central Task Force Arrangement Society means, it's that building over there. Like, okay. Edward Charles Reed means me. I don't know. It's funny to me when the definition is shorter than the. Should get something in exchange means three dots, parentheses, CVI 2, 1 to 3. Instead of belonging to an order, read belonging to a company, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for, and parentheses, three dots, if she is the first wrongdoer. All right. Forfeiture, Nissaggiya 10. At one time, the enlightened the Lord, was staying at Savatthi in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery. Now at that time, the nun Tulananda, that's fun, something happening. I mean, it's not anything new, but something. All right, the nun Tulananda was very learned. She was a repeater. She was wise. She was skilled in giving Dhamma talk. Many people visited the nun Tulananda. Now, at that time, the nun Tulananda's cell was falling to pieces. People spoke thus to the nun Tulananda, quote, "Why is this cell of yours, lady, falling to pieces?" End quote. Quote, "Sirs, there are neither benefactors nor are there workmen." End quote. Then these people, having made a voluntary collection for the nun Tulananda's cell, gave what was necessary to the nun Tulananda. And the nun Tulananda, although having herself asked for what was necessary, kind of, by saying what she was missing, she didn't actually ask for it, but whatever. Yet, having got medicine in exchange, made use of it. It's just funny to imagine they're just getting honey or something. Like, give me a mixture of honey and ghee and I think curd, which means Greek yogurt for people outside of India. Anyway, the people, having found out, spread it about, saying, quote, "How can the lady Tulananda get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to an individual, parentheses, and parentheses, what she herself asked for," end quote, three dots. Quote, "Is it true, as is said, monks, that the nun Tulananda, three dots, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for," end quote, quote, "It is true, Lord," end quote. The enlightened one, the Lord, rebuked them, saying, quote, "How, monks, can the nun Tulananda, three dots, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for." Is she back here or is she up here? It's hard for me to tell. Never mind. "It is not, monks, for pleasing those who are not yet," in parentheses, "pleased," three dots, "this rule of training. Whatever nun should get something in exchange for what was necessary, parentheses, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, belonging to an individual, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for, there is an offense of expiation involving forfeiture. End quote. Thank you, the nun Tulananda. You may go. All right. Whatever means 3 dots. None means 3 dots. What did I say? In 3 more we'll do it? Okay, so 2 more. For what was necessary, parentheses, and appointed, and parentheses, appointed for another thing, destined for another thing, 3 dots. Belonging to an individual means it is for one nun, not for an order, not for a group, that she herself asked for, oneself having asked for. Should get something in exchange means 3 dots, parentheses. As above, read constantly belonging to an individual, parentheses, and parentheses, that she herself asked for, end parentheses, 3 dots, if she is the first wrongdoer. Hey, Tulananda, are you the first wrongdoer? No, she is not the first wrongdoer. She has wrong done before. All right. So I think, the previous episode and this episode was 5 different examples of when something necessary is being given to you. Don't exchange it for honey or ghee or molasses or curd. Take the blankets or whatever, the robe material. Can you hear the train? Use it, distribute it, and that's it. Don't trade it usually for medicine, for ice cream or whatever, Medicine. I know in most states in the U.S. and Netherlands, that would have an entirely different meaning. If somebody gave food, and I could see that easily coming up, like, I'm starving, could you give me food? And give them a bag of chips, and they quickly go trade the bag of chips for medicine. Okay, I think that's it. If you're interested, longtime viewers know that this is not my only podcast. Just yesterday, I released an episode of a podcast that the episodes only come up about once every 3 months. And I ended that episode by referring people to this podcast. So just to make a nice yin-yang, I'll put the dot. Feel free to click there if you want to keep seeing my face and keep hearing my voice, but you don't mind if the robe changes a little bit. And I will go ahead and close. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Until next time.